Good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining us. Welcome to our GA4 webinar. My name's Lacey. I'm going to be kicking us off. Very briefly, for anybody who isn't familiar with SearchLab, we're an integrated global digital marketing agency of about 150 people split between two offices, some in the UK and then also here in the US. Data and analytics are crucial for everything that we do over here, from running campaigns and all of the channels that we manage. And because of this, we have a very strong analytics team, tracking experts, and digital strategists. Just a quick overview about SearchLab. You kind of see down there some of the things that we offer, everything from SEO, paid media. We have a very strong international offering as well. And again, all of this is backed up through our analytics data science team and then also digital strategy. Some quick intros. Like I said, my name's Lacey, but Paul and Jimmy will be handling the majority of this webinar. Paul is our head of analytics and data science. Jimmy is our head of digital strategy. A few quick housekeeping notes here. This webinar will last about 45 minutes. During that time, feel free to ask any questions. As we go along, there's a chat box that you see, and at the end of the webinar, we'll have some time for questions and answers. A quick look at the agenda here. We're going to take a look at the landscape, the digital landscape in 2022. Go ahead and do an intro to GA4, the enhancements for measurement that it offers, how it's different from the universal analytics. We're going to do a quick GA4 explorations demo, go into what the benefits are in using this, and then of course a quick summary at the end as well. And as I mentioned, time for questions and answers at the end. So I'm going to go ahead and kick us off and pass it over to Paul.
Great, thank you, Lacey, and welcome everybody to this kind of webinar on GA4. We hope to take through, at very least, the main benefits and reasons we should be all getting going on this now. So I suppose to start us off, it would be just good to discuss the landscape, the digital landscape in 2022. So back in 2005, which was when Google first bought Shearing, which was the analytics platform that the current Google Analytics is based on, the world was a very different place, really. There was no smartphones or tablets and no apps, really, therefore. It was really just websites, and people didn't have as many devices at all. So, you know, fast forward to where we are today, and you know, everyone is engaging with companies through many devices, and we've also got a large kind of regulation and privacy changes in the industry, really, from governments and from browser kind of producers. So yeah, so I suppose a few years ago, to deal with this changing landscape, Google started work on a new platform. Back at the time, it was Firebase Analytics, and it was an app-only platform, and that's kind of evolved. It was called App and Web, now called the new Google Analytics, although people call it GA4, Google Analytics 4. And that's kind of where we are today, really. So I'm just going to talk a little bit more in detail around some of the biggest problems that changing landscape is presenting to us, really, and specifically talk through a few with a few examples. So yeah, back in 2005, like we said, everyone, well, not everyone, but there was more of a single device kind of engagement with companies. You know, this would be typical, and if someone bought at the end of engaging with a website after a few different visits, you would generally be able to join the dots up and attribute in a much better manner. Fast forward to where we are now, and we've got this multi-device world, which, you know, this is a very common slide. I'm sure most people have seen this many times before over the last few years, so I won't dwell on it, but yeah, the key point is it raises real big questions around the reliability of the attribution that your analytics is giving you, and also the user count metric. So we know this is one person, but there's going to be 3 users reported in your web analytics tool. Second big problem is the way that browsers are changing how they deal with privacy for their users, and most specifically, I'm going to talk about Safari and ITP, but the other browsers are also changing. And specifically in relation to web analytics platforms like Google Analytics, it's the first-party cookie that we're really talking about. So ITP is Google, Safari and Apple's privacy initiative, which in about 2017, it started blocking and removing third-party cookies. Early 2018, it started to limit the expiration of first-party cookies. So this is when it started to impact on web analytics tools. So yeah, like I said, before all this happened, if somebody came 5 times on a single device, generally you'd be able to track those 5 visits and attribute sensibly towards them. After all the ITP changes that are impacted on first-party cookies, if somebody has a period of more than 7 days on an Apple device where they haven't visited your site, the cookie will fall off and a new one gets assigned. And as you can see here, we've now got 3 different, to all intents, different users, different client IDs and devices. So again, that's a big problem. Safari and Apple proportion, the proportion of people that use those browsers on your website differs, but it can be 40, 50, 60% sometimes. So yeah, again, a big problem. So yeah, and finally, I'm just going to touch on the problem of regulation and law changes, and most specifically, in a lot of regions, there is this requirement to get explicit consent before you place a cookie to track people. So these cookie tools, if somebody says no and doesn't consent, we just lose the visibility of that segment of traffic. So you might sell 100 things in a day and only 70 of them are making it into your web analytics platform. Again, that's a massive problem when you're trying to report and make judgments on what you're doing in terms of marketing. So I suppose the summary of all that, those problems I've just presented are really how accurate is your analytics data as it stands today, and specifically the user count, the count of conversions and goals, and how it's attributing. If we've got these disjointed paths, we're losing visibility of the full path. So how accurate is it? And I suppose the answer to that is not very. It's more of a benchmark that's evolved over time. But yeah, the world has got digital marketers have got a very big problem on the hands with all of this at the moment, trying to make the most of it, really. So yeah, that's the problem. That's the landscape we're in at the moment. We can't change that. So Google Analytics 4, is built from the ground up with modeling and machine learning at its heart, really. And this is really the solution I'm going to present to you now that helps deal with the problems that I've just presented. Before I do that, I just wanted to touch on how it joins the dots together, how it joins users up. So Universal Analytics used to use or does use client ID, device ID. It's just a cookie ID that's stored. Whereas GA4 has got the option to, at property level to select if you want it to join people up using user ID or a thing called Google Signals. I'll talk about that in a minute. But basically, if you're logged in on an authenticated system, it'll use your CRM, internal user ID. If not, then it'll use Google's kind of technology to identify it, and then failing that, device ID. So that's kind of that. So on Google Signals, just to, an explanation of what that is. If people are logged into a Google device or a Google account in a Chrome browser, for example, and in their Google account they've given consent to be tracked, then Google is able to join the dots. So if you come back on 2 different devices, but you're signed into your Google account and have consented to this, Google can join the dots and see you're actually the same person, even though that cookie on both those devices is totally different. And that's kind of the fundamental kind of how it works really in terms of Google Signals. So that's kind of core to how what I'm going to present now kind of works for most of it. And essentially modeling is it's kind of using the observed set of data. So this is a proportion of your web visitors every day will be on Google devices, logged in and consented to being tracked by Google. So Google has the ability to join the dots if it's the same person. So it uses this small subset of your web traffic, and it makes inferences and joins everything together. Then it applies that to the whole data set, so the whole of your traffic, and in this model data. And the end result really is this this modeled kind of conversions and attribution and user metric is a much more accurate, corrected representation of what your actual users and what your actual attribution channels are. So just to go through a little bit and relate them to those problems I presented earlier. In the observed data set, an individual might be engaging with a website on 3 different devices. Google can join those up. It doesn't present that data back to you in the BigQuery data or in the interface directly, but it knows and can join it when it processes that, and it uses that to model the data of all the other people where there isn't any visibility of this. Again, on the same device, if people if on Apple devices, these cookies are dropping because Apple is removing the ID and the cookie. In that observed data set, it can infer kind of the proportion that hasn't, and basically make the information you see much more reliable. And finally, relating to the final problem, which was if people haven't consented to drop a cookie for tracking purposes, Google uses a slightly different mechanism to kind of help get around that problem, and it's a product called Google Consent Mode, which is actually a feature of Google Tag Manager or GTag, and in essence, a signal gets sent into Google Tag Manager, which indicates the consent that user has given, and then Tag Manager alters the behavior of all those Google tags. It's only a Google tag thing, so not Bing or anything like that, but specifically Google Analytics 4. So it will alter the behavior, so it doesn't set or read a cookie if somebody's not consented, so you're still compliant and legal, and it still collects that data. Now that data is not joined up by a common ID, so we can't go into the main data set, but it stores it in a kind of partition separate data set, and then it will use that to model the whole set. So the aim is if you've sold 100 things in a day, you see 100 things, and it models the source and the medium and the channel that those missing 30% or whatever it is have come from. So yeah, that's kind of the solution there. It's only available in GA4, and it's not actually a released feature yet, but we're expecting it imminently, and certainly within the next few months we're hoping the conversions you see will include this non-consented set of data. So very closely related. In fact, the modeling is kind of feeds into attribution, and attribution is the next kind of big kind of leap forward in terms of what Google Analytics gives you, really. And yeah, so I just wanted to start off by talking about kind of universal analytics. Universal analytics, I'm sure most of you know, gives you conversion figures, and the default or the only attribution model in the main reports, the ones that I've highlighted on the left there, is the last non-direct click attribution. So that's you've got to make the most of that attribution model. There is other attribution models. If you've got 360, there's a data-driven attribution model, but that's all held in the multi-channel funnels, which is a subset of reports and a kind of comparison tool rather than integrated into the tool in full. So that's kind of universal analytics. So the big change in GA4 is it's now a property level setting. So you can go in, choose the attribution model you like, set it at the property, and that will then apply to all of your reports, the data reports you get out of the API, the analysis hub, which Jimmy will show you in a bit more detail soon. So it will give you those attribution models throughout the interface, which is a complete change really to universal. In regards to model types, there's lots of the standard models, first click, linear, position-based models, but the big one really is this cross-channel data-driven attribution is now available to everybody. So it used to be the luxury of people that were buying 360. It's now available in the standard version, which is great really, because being able to join those dots and going back is a big thing. The other big change to universal analytics is it excludes credit really from the direct channel, because unless direct is the only contributing channel and where people find your website. So on top of all that, don't forget you've got the corrections through this modeling that it does, which I presented earlier. So yeah, I suppose in summary, that the whole outcome of all that really is better results, more reliable results, and we've seen in cases a swing in some campaigns, especially if they're upper funnel campaigns where you're missing a lot on the last non-direct click basis on universal. So there's massive swings of the credit that is being given to different channels. And just touching on the methodology, so like I said, Universal's got a data-driven model if you buy 360. This is available to everyone, but the methodology is ultimately based on the same fundamental kind of building blocks, the Shapley value, but it's got lots of improvements to it. And Google have published and are very transparent with how they do it, and there's a paper you can go and read and understand what's going on. But just as an example of a few of the improvements, they now look at the different, instead of just comparing converting and non-comparing converting paths and seeing trying to infer the effect certain channels have, they now do things like look at the touch points, the closeness of a touch point to the conversion, to see if that affects how much credit it should get, and also things like a correction for unresolved paths. So whenever you've got a data set, there's always, if we looked in Google Analytics now there's always a load of paths in there that in the future these users are going to buy. They've just not got there yet. So it makes corrections for these unresolved paths that will convert but just haven't done yet. So yeah, data-driven attribution standard as well as the 360 version, and throughout the interface, not just in a small subset of the reports. It's big news. It's cross-device and is a huge leap forward really in this kind of world with all the problems I presented earlier. So just a few other things really before I pass over to Jimmy, and it's really just a few of the key differences between universal analytics, other than what I've just described. So I've already touched on user ID, but and how it works, but universal had these, there was a user ID feature in universal, but you had this siloed kind of separate view. With GA4, it picks the best ID to join people up, but ultimately all the data goes in the same pot and interface. So that's makes things much easier and more, I suppose, usable and better, basically. But also this kind of persistent ID, if you've got a logged in authenticated platform, is great for kind of long-term customer relationships. So if you've got a long-term customer you've had for 10 years, in analytics, you will be seeing the same customer if they keep coming back and logging in. And also if you're doing clever kind of first-party based marketing using CRM data, so pushing a CRM segment into GA against a user ID, for example, which I would definitely encourage in today's world. But that user ID is more persistent and I suppose just much more effective with GA4. One other big change really is the kind of architecture. So I said Google started re-engineering the product, and it was a back to basic, well, back to the drawing board really. From the ground up, they've built this new architecture, and that is this kind of event-based architecture. So Universal Analytics is very much based around the concept of a session. You know, you track page views and events, but then Google processes those into a session and derives and aggregates metrics at the session level, which is a bit more complicated, slow, more processing intensive. So GA4 has got this very simple concept of an event, and against an event there's various parameters that might help describe that event. And everything you see in GA4 is represented by an event. So out of the box, it automatically tracks quite a lot of things. I've listed the 4 there as an example. There's lots more, especially on the app side, for things like, well, there's all kinds of things. But yeah, even things like a session are represented by an event. So instead of having this session record in the underlying data set, it just creates an event and then it filters on that when you want to count your sessions. Same with first visitors. So yeah, in addition to what you get out of the box just by putting the basic tracking code on the web page or the app, the SDK, it gives you a huge ability to customize. So it really is a case of you looking at your website or your app or business and say what events occur in this platform, and then mapping them out and then making sure the tracking goes on. You can customize what events you want to track and also what parameters and dimensions, custom dimensions you wanted to track around those kind of events. So yeah, altogether much simpler. I've said sessions, it doesn't process sessions. They are still a thing, and the session scope, custom dimensions, for example, are still on the roadmap as our landing page dimension, which is a kind of session dimension. So these things are all there. There's a session ID on every hit within a session. So it's not like they're not there, but sessions are more of a website thing, and even a website thing. They're not. It's not a great metric when you've got the users metric, which is what most people would say is the better thing now. And users is I put it in this slide. I've not forgotten, but it's kind of first and foremost in GA. It's what it's all based around. And there's things like user properties, which are the way you can track in user level things and persist those. So yeah, all in, this new architecture has got huge benefits in terms of the speed because of the way it collects it, the way it gets data when you run a report. Because it's a very simple concept, an event with some parameters, it's easier to design and implement, and ultimately kind of that easier kind of understanding makes it easier to do analysis and easier to do reporting on it. So as long as you've got a well documented set of events that you understand is going on in your website or app, it becomes a lot easier, and I think there's a lot of plus sides to that really. So yeah, I'm going to talk about it in a bit, but I'm going to hand over now to Jimmy, who's going to run through a bit of a demo of some of the interface and some of the reports.
Thanks, Paul. Hi, everybody. I'm Jimmy. As Paul said, I'm going to look at the explorations feature in Google Analytics 4. You may or may not be familiar with this type of, I think it used to be called advanced analysis in GA 360 if you have that tool, but now this is available as standard in all, unpaid GA4 accounts. So I'll just come out of the presentation and into a web browser. So you should see the screen with the explorations. You'll see there's a number of different free-form or explorations available, sort of predefined, but you can also build your own one from scratch. So I'm going to dig into a funnel example now. So you may be familiar with funnels in Google Analytics from enhanced e-commerce funnels, but also custom funnels in GA360. The difference with the funnel here in GA4 in the exploration section is that the funnel is called upon query. So what that means is that upon creating it, I can look back through all the data that I have in this particular property, and I can see how users have gone down that funnel over time. With custom funnels and enhanced e-commerce, they are processing time funnels. So basically, they only work from the day that you implement them. So you have to wait an amount of time for data to gather in order for you to analyze it. But this is completely free-form exploration, and you can pull out insights quickly and easily within the interface, which was always being quite difficult with Universal Analytics. A lot of downloading and then or connecting to another tool such as Data Studio. So anyway, here's the funnel, and this is a standard e-commerce checkout using the Google Merchandise Store. So you can see it's a first visit, and then like a product list view, so like a product category, and then so people who actually drilled into view a particular product, those that added it to a basket, and finally those who purchased. So you can see the completion and the completion rate for each stage, and you can identify any blockers or things that might be a problem throughout that journey. What we can also do here is I can actually show you the steps. So this again, this is completely user specified. So you would create, you can add in steps at different stages, and they can be based off any event that you will have in GA4 at all that you've executed. So you can see there that as you can see, 1.29% overall conversion rate for that segment. So what we can also do is we can get a bit more granular. So we could drag and drop, basically really intuitive. We can drag and drop certain dimensions into this funnel exploration, and as you can see, that's popped that out and give me a breakdown in total, but also per country. By the way, you can also add extra dimensions there, and that's a full list of all the dimensions. If it's unavailable, it'll be sort of transparent and a bit translucent. So anyway, here's the list of countries. You can see there that what we're looking for is discrepancies from the normal. I suppose that's a key red flag, that not many Chinese users who initially open or visit actually make it to that second stage. So there might be an issue there with the site appearing in for Chinese users. But also then you can also drill down deeper to further down the funnel, and again you can see another variance that sticks out quite significantly is that only 1.24% of users from India who added to basket out of the 404 that did actually purchased. So that just and an overall conversion rate of 0.03%. So again, this would, if I was the e-commerce manager on this, I would be simulating that journey and speaking to the developer about why potentially that's happening for Indian users. So that's one example. I will jump into another. So this is another funnel exploration. So this is a much more rudimentary example, but again, something that you could action very quickly. So this is just a first-time user and a form completion on the Search Laboratory website. So you can see there that the form completion rate on users who scrolled. So I created these two segments. So this is a different section. This is completely, again, user configurable. I can create this based on number of rules and statements that are similar to the way that segments currently work in analytics. A scroll, by the way, is a predefined event in GA4, which is where the user scrolled in excess of 90% of that page. So you can see that it's a good measure of engagement, because our scrolled users convert 3 times more, almost 3 times more than the unscrolled users. So there's a bucket there of 7,250, where potentially we could, they're highly engaged as per, or much more engaged than the rest of the traffic. So we could do remarketing towards that segment of people. So people who scrolled, we could be more targeted at trying to get more of those people to come back and then subsequently fill a form in. And by the way, that is very easily done through, if you just click on those segments and click edit, it will pop out with the definition, and it's just when a user scrolls, but you can also immediately build the audience from this interface. Once you've built that audience, you can share it, import it into Google Ads or DV360, for example, and market to those people specifically. So that's funnels. So now we'll jump into Pathin. So Pathin is a brand new exploration specific to GA4. So this wasn't in advanced analysis in GA360. So we can drill into what users do as they move through the website using this particular tool, which has not really been easily done before within the interface. So we've defined our starting point here. Our event is a first visit, and you can see there's like a secondary event here as a second step, but I can alter that and to show me the page title where this event occurred. So if just give that a second to load, you can see that the home page is showing, and this is the merchandise store again. The home page is shown as the top one, and then we can see the subsequent pages, and you can actually drill further and deeper into seeing what types of pages was the first visit on. But actually something that just jumped out on this particular analysis was there's the first visit, there's a page unavailable. So initially, that's a bit of a red flag. Or it's not a huge proportion of users, but it's still worth addressing. So potentially, you can carry on this this analysis to see what's happening. Are they stuck in a loop? Are they going elsewhere? Click that again. You can see that there's a lot not set, but also it appears that more than half are actually abandoning at that point, probably exiting the site. So something that we can do here is we can actually add device as a breakdown. So we can add that to our analysis. It should just take a moment to segment. And you can see here now at the bottom, we have these different segments. So as I move up along from right to left, you can see smart TV, that's not triggering many page unavailables. Tablets, again, attribute a very small proportion, and relatively mobile's not contributing that much either. So primarily desktop is the big, there's a bit of a trend on the desktop side of things. So again, you could segment that particular scenario. There's we could look at how people are reaching that particular page, etc., on desktop, or what particular browser or setup their technology is, to try to pinpoint what the problem is and try to address it with the development team. So those are a couple of ways at how you could use these two types of analysis. So I'll just finally, the last one that I'll show you now is another pathing, but not only, I just showed you a forward pathing, but you can also do reverse pathing. So you just create a free-form pathing analysis and select your event, which can be any event that you have created. So I'm going to select the contact success. So now I will be able to see, are there any common pages or common pathways that users are taking to reach a successful form fill. So again, here's my event and the previous event. I can change that to the page that potentially they were on prior that event occurred on. As you can see, it's the thank you page primarily, but then I can continue popping those out. That's the contact us page before that. And then you can see there's a home page there and some deeper pages, and I can do that on this strand as well, and it will pop out all those common journeys. So you can see here that primarily it's home page led. There's a lot of people reaching us there first and then going to convert. There's a few common threads, albeit small numbers, very small, but there's the fact that we're a Google marketing sales partner, that seems to be a key page that is driving people to us to convert then as well. Just a note as well on here that if you right click on any of the nodes, you can actually exclude it from just that path or from all paths. So if I select that, it should give me a better representation of all the paths where they didn't touch the home page. So it might give me more insight into how people are navigating the deeper pages. So so that is the explorations. I will hand back to Paul, who can continue with what we're going to do now.
Great, thanks, Jimmy. So yeah, I won't be long with this one. I've just got a couple of slides really, just to talk about where we are now and what now with J4 really. So if you've not already, we need to be getting on with dual implementation in terms of, at least implementing like for your current Universal Analytics platform. And there's quite a bit of planning that solution, which is a step that you should really consider and do properly. But ultimately, get the tracking codes implemented and at least get the very basics up and running. And then the next really, it's a case of QAing. Whenever you implement a new platform, there's always some kind of discrepancies in metrics and data. Most of the time, whenever I've done it, it's with good explanations. For example, there's different definitions of what they are, and the modeling will mean there are differences. But yeah, ultimately QA and adjust to the new figures, learn and familiarize yourself with the new platform. And you can start right now benefiting from the things that are ready. There's still a few things in the roadmap, and Google is still working frantically to kind of improve and make this so it's truly enterprise ready, which is getting there fast. But there's still things to do, but you can still get the benefit from a lot of it already right now. And yeah, when we're ready, when you're ready to switch, it's just a case of I suppose becoming dependent on the new platform. Hopefully you'll forget the other ones there, and yeah, you can just turn it off as and when you're ready really. I've just put this final slide from me on planning the solution. So GA4 is a kind of a structured schema. So you have to think first about what events you are going to track in your implementation. So it does take a little bit of design and documentation up front. And there's two ways you can do that. You can go into Google Tag Manager and your current analytics and kind of map what you're doing in there into this structured schema, into a documented form. Or you could use it as an opportunity to go back to the drawing board and start from scratch around the events that occur on your website or within your app. I've just put there, if you've implemented Universal Analytics using GTag, there's a very useful upgrade kind of feature, which doesn't really require you to change any code at all. So you can do that within the interface, and there's a few rules around that, but yeah, it's definitely worth you using that if you're using GTag to implement Universal Analytics. So great, so that's it from me now. So I'm going to hand back to Jimmy, who's got a final few points.
Thanks, Paul. So yeah, I'm just going to cover why should we use it. So to to show this, here's a hypothetical example of an individual user journey. So hopefully we can demonstrate the difference that GA4 can make here. So as I say, this is a hypothetical journey where the user has hit a number of touch points along the path to conversion. The conversion being on a brand search keyword where they filled the form and converted, and they were worth $100. So for Universal Analytics, we'll be lucky if we see these two interactions here. For the reasons that Paul said before, there's difficulties with being able to string the user path together. So there could be different devices involved, the cookie deletion through ITP, there's consent to navigate, but then we also have private browsing as well. So this is a hypothetical example of Google Analytics, Universal Google Analytics would only potentially see a couple of interactions at the bottom of the path. Coupled that with the default last non-direct click attribution that Google Analytics Universal has, and we can see that brand search is attributed $100 worth of credit to that last interaction, and then the organic by default doesn't have anything. You can actually amend that. There is options to build your own attribution model within Google Analytics. So potentially you could manipulate the attribution model to give more credit to that earlier touch point. But even in this scenario, if you're using Google Analytics goals connected to your advertising platforms, the machine would potentially see this scenario and make a decision based on maximizing, it would see that the value here is driven by brand search. So the machine would do as it's told and maximize that brand search. That could also mean that it cannibalizes organic. We don't know in this scenario, but it could do that if it was just looking at those short-term, short view of things. And as a human looking at this scenario, the decisions that you're making are that, well, I have some generic paid search campaigns going on, but it doesn't look like it's performing as well as I want it to. It might not be, providing a good enough return on investment for me to invest more. So I might actually want to pull back on those generic search campaigns. So if we change and look at this exact same scenario in a Google Analytics 4 measurement makeup, we can see that the earlier interactions are being accounted for, and that's because modeling is filling in the gaps. So we get, as for the reasons that Paul explained before, the consent mode, cross-device and modeling, and DDA are helping us understand what's actually happened. As I said then, DDA is the default attribution model in GA4. So therefore, it will give appropriate credit to the drivers of that conversion throughout that given scenario. So in this scenario, it could look like actually that generic paid search did a good job much earlier on in that campaign as an upper funnel driver, and that was a significant played a more significant role in the acquisition of that customer. So the machine would then optimize more toward the generic paid search campaign, which is, it would be beneficial for acquiring new customers. What decisions as a human are you making? You can see that generic paid search is actually providing a good return, and you want to dig deeper into that and build your campaigns out, and maybe even in tandem build out organic around certain areas that are working for your, based on your insight from this data-driven attribution model. So I just wanted to move on to a key feature of Google Analytics 4. This is the native integration with BigQuery. I know Paul mentioned it a bit earlier. we can use this as a cloud data warehouse. So what we have there is the event level data going into BigQuery streamed into that system. What we can do with that is then join it with any other first-party data source that you might have. So for example, CRM data, you can stream that data into that same place. And as long as you are able to identify a user on the same ID in that system, you can join all your CRM data, your offline data, with your online data browsing behaviors. What we can do there is, as I say, clean it, join it, deduplicate your users should they have signed up multiple times or purchased multiple times on guest, etc. It's also interoperable, so you can have connectors to third-party systems and send information using APIs to help activate it in different platforms. You can also access the machine learning and AI technology that sits within Google Cloud to do use cases and data projects. So you can build bespoke audience segmentation. You can use all the data that you have on the customers to predict a lifetime value, or you could even score your form, the form that has been filled in at that point of form fill, and then send that back into GA4 against that user. So going back to the example of this user journey, the benefit of using GA4 in conjunction with Google BigQuery, where you have a CRM tie-up, is that you can actually then extend your visibility and optimization ability to the offline interaction, the real business level objectives. So you can actually help the machine optimize toward things like sale, profit, future purchase, or a lifetime value. Coupled with your data-driven attribution model, you can then assign appropriate credit to each of these stages, and it actually might turn out that certain areas are driving more value than other areas. They might be driving a similar amount of conversions, but are they worth profit and value, for example, that you traditionally can't tie up? So then, what is the machine optimizing towards? As I said, it's conversions that provide value, customers more likely to become loyal, or leads more likely to become valuable sales, for example. So the last part now from me is a brief summary of actions that you can take now. So very short-term actions, as I say, is you have to set GA4 up now. This allows you to collect the data to do something with it in future. So make sure you have a sound implementation, make sure you're using consent mode, and set up your BigQuery stream. From a medium-term scenario, use the best features in tandem with your current single source of truth, i.e. Universal Analytics. You can use DDA to measure, see if certain campaigns are providing more value than you anticipated they were. You can see Surface Insight with the explorations I talked through previously in the demo. But as I say, the most important thing is collecting that data for future use. And then finally, long term, it's like Paul said, when we're further along that timeline, you have enough data to migrate to that GA4 as your single source of truth. You have the continuity and the reporting because you have the historic collection, and it allows you to, you've got all that data in BigQuery, and hopefully you've joined it up with your CRM, and that the sky's the limit in terms of data projects for future performance growth. So now I will hand back to Lacey, who can take any questions from the attendees.
Okay, perfect. Thanks, Jimmy, and thank you, Paul. We'll go ahead with the few minutes we have left and start going through some questions that have come through. First one is, how long does it take to set this up, and what's involved with the process?
Yeah, so I suppose it's how long's a piece of string, but I mean, ultimately it depends how complex the implementation will be and how it's implemented. Taking an average implementation that's done through Google Tag Manager, so you don't have to put anything else in place other than map those tags and the data that goes into them. You might, at its simplest, it's a couple of hours, but you might be wise to put a day or two aside, maybe more, depending on complexity, and if you want to do anything else, and then you get into reconciling figures, which can add to that as well.
Okay. Question 2, is it possible to track point of sales and CRM activity in GA4? And if so, how can we implement that?
Yeah, so as with Universal Analytics, GA4 has got a measurement protocol. So a measurement protocol is ultimately the definition of how to send tracking hits into the platform. So you can do that. You can send these like tracking hits from any network connected device or a server or what have you. So that's exactly the same. Universal Analytics and GA4 have both got that. One really exciting feature of GA4 is the ability to do a kind of event level data import. So you can load a file of offline sales, point of sale events into Google Analytics every night, and that's an alternative way. So yeah, it depends on what and how you want to get the data in there, but there's more opportunity and it's a better platform essentially for getting that data in, I think. Yeah, so that's that really.
Okay. And do we know when Universal Analytics will be removed?
Yep, I'll take that. There's no plans to deprecate it at the moment. It's going to be there for the time foreseeable. But it's also worth saying that Google Analytics engineers are not putting any new product, any time into developing that product at all. All the new features and engineering expertise are being put into GA4. So it's very much the future product, and the sooner you migrate to it, install it, and then allow yourself the ability to migrate to it when the time is right.
Perfect. And it looks like last question, is GA4 more towards e-commerce sites, or can it be for any type of business?
Yeah, I'll take that one. I mean, it's any type of business, and as I said, it's an architecture and platform that is made for apps just as much as a website. So, and I think I mentioned in we're talking about this event schema, but you've got the ability to customize it to the, you can customize up to 500 events. With 50 on the standard version, 50 custom dimensions, 125 in the 360 version. So you can customize it to do whatever occurs in your website. So e-commerce or B2B or any other website really.
Okay. Great. It looks like those are the only questions we have. I'll go ahead and wrap up. Thanks again, Paul and Jimmy, for all of the information. It seems the overall message that, if nothing else, you take home is that companies must get this installed as soon as possible in parallel with what they're normally doing. We'll go ahead and we will arrange for a follow-up email along with the recording of this webinar for you all. And if you guys have any individual questions that you want to come back with, we're happy to help in any way. Just let us know, but don't hesitate to reach out to myself or the broader team, and we'll get you taken care of. And I think that's it for today. So we'll go ahead and wrap up.